Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dev Den. Make sure, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab one of these headsets. They're at the back there so that you can follow along with the full silent disco experience. Now, last but not least, we're going to hear some very exciting new developments from the team at Lightning Labs. We all know them as the folks who brought us fast Bitcoin payments, but now you can do much more with it with Taproot Assets. So, Hannah Rosenberg from Lightning Labs, welcome to the stage.
Hello, welcome everyone. Can y'all hear me? Okay, cool, excellent. All right, so I think if this works, there we go. We're going to be talking about Taproot Assets on Lightning. So I'm going to try and get a feel for where we are in the room here. Can you raise your hands if you're already semi-familiar with Taproot Assets? A little bit? Couple of people? All right, cool. So for those who aren't familiar, this is a protocol that uses Taproot, of course, and allows you to add assets to Bitcoin, and now with the latest release to Lightning as well. And so just this week on Tuesday, we had a new release of Taproot Assets, which makes Taproot Assets now you can exchange Taproot Assets on the Lightning Network, right? So this is our new release we had on Tuesday, and that's what we're going to talk about today. But first, if you want to follow along with the slide deck, or if you want to go back and look at any of the links or the images or anything that are in here, you can scan that QR code, and that should give you access to it. If it doesn't, let me know. I'll change the permissions on there. All right, cool. Everyone got that? Awesome. Okay. And we'll do a little bit about me. My name's Hannah Rosenberg. I am a developer advocate at Lightning Labs, so that means it is my job to answer all of your questions about this technology. So maybe at the end, if we have some time, we'll do some Q&A here, and also I will be around after this talk if anyone has further questions about this technology and building with it. There's all the various different socials that I'm on, so you can find me there. And let's talk about what we'll discuss today. So we've got Taproot Assets on Lightning. So that's what I'm going to talk about now, a little bit about how that works and all the new things you can do with the new release of Taproot Assets. So we'll talk about the new features in version 0.4. We'll talk about working with Taproot Assets. We'll talk about assets on Lightning, talk about what that looks like, how you can work with it. We'll talk about my new favoriteest thing, which is edge nodes. And we'll do a bit of a demo. When I say demo, I mean there's a video in there. So I'll play the video for you. Cool. All right. So Taproot Assets version 0.4, there's some really cool new features. We're going to talk about trustless on-chain swaps. We're going to talk about multi-sig support. And we're going to talk about assets in Lightning channels. So first of all, I'm going to note a couple of new things, and this is for people who have perhaps been already playing with this a little bit. This was sort of our previous tech stack that we were using. Sort of you'd be running a Bitcoin node, you'd be running an LND node, and then you'd be running Taproot Assets. We've so you can definitely still run this stack, but now we're recommending using terminal. So if you have a node where you've been playing with this, we now recommend switching over to terminal, which gives you all of these lovely things with it, and this really helps everything work together pretty seamlessly. So it's just a cool way to get a Lightning node that includes Taproot Assets up and running really quickly. All right, so first thing that we're going to talk about is trustless on-chain swaps. But I want to, again, read the room here. Is anyone, how many people are familiar with PSBTs, partially signed Bitcoin transactions? A few people? Cool. All right. So this makes use of PSBTs, which is Taproot Asset users and developers can automatically swap assets for Bitcoin or other Taproot assets via partially signed Bitcoin transactions. And partially signed Bitcoin transactions, for those who aren't familiar, is exactly what the name says. Right, it's just a way to coordinate with someone else on a Bitcoin transaction. So one party, say Alice, puts together a transaction, signs her inputs and her outputs, right, and then passes it along to Bob, who adds his information to the transaction and adds his signatures where appropriate as well. All right, cool. So with that, we can use this to trade non-interactively in a chain-efficient manner and without requiring trusted counterparties or a centralized coordinator. So that's really cool, and let's just talk through a little bit what that might look like, again, using our classic characters Alice and Bob, and I'll show you a nice non-technical picture. This is sort of what a PSBT swap looks like in my head, right? This is how it looks, right? So we might imagine that this part here is Alice's half of this transaction, Alice's part. And Alice may have, let's say, a US dollar stablecoin, which has been issued using Taproot Assets. And Alice would like to sell that, perhaps for some Satoshis, right? And so Alice will put together her part of a Bitcoin transaction, including, her outputs and her inputs. And she says, hey, I'm going to put, I want to sell, I want to give to someone these, Taproot Assets, this, $1,000 worth of a US dollar stablecoin, and I'd like to receive, $1,000 of Satoshis, right? And so she signs those outputs and that input, and then she can just post this, right? Just add it to a forum somewhere, post it on a service that, facilitates this, etc. And of course, Bob, because who else would come around and want to take the other side of this transaction? Bob wants some US dollar stablecoin, and he has some Satoshis, and he can just, sign this, say, okay, I like that deal. I'm going to add my information and sign it and broadcast it, put those two parts together. It becomes a complete Bitcoin transaction, broadcast that to the Bitcoin blockchain. So this is really cool, especially I like that non-interactive part, right? Alice can just create this and post it wherever she like, and anyone who's interested in taking that deal can do so. So this, of course, we're using the example of a stablecoin and Satoshis, but there's all kinds of different things that you could use this for. So a very cool new feature in the new release. And let's move along to the next cool thing that we have. I'm saving the coolest stuff for last, right, which is all the Lightning functionality. But this is very important too, right? So this is not quite as fun, but really, really important if you're building any real, production application. Obviously, security is of huge importance, right? So I won't go into the details here of, the data structure that's used for Taproot Assets, but it's, these Merkle trees, and there's a number of different levels of this. I joke that it's like a Merkle forest. And so there's a number of different layers to how the data structure works here, which means there's a number of different layers where you can use multi-sig to secure what you're doing here, right? So we have so many multi-sig possibilities, things that are possible, places where it's possible to use multi-sig to secure Taproot assets. All right, so we have the Bitcoin script level. It's the internal key if you're familiar with Taproot transactions. You can use musig2 there. We have the Taproot key level. So that's that sort of first level of Taproot assets. You can use musig2 or old school K of M. We have the asset group key level. Again, there you have musig2 or K of M. And then we have the actual asset level, where again you have musig2 or K of M. And then for the more visual people, I have a pretty picture, right? And so you can see this is a super duper simplified set of Merkle trees. Obviously, in reality, they're much, much bigger than this. But you can see all the different levels where it's possible to use multi-sig, right? And so I want to talk about this a little bit, right? This is sort of all this level up here is sort of standard Taproot Bitcoin transaction stuff. But I want to talk, then we get into the Taproot asset layer here, and then here's this group key level. And this is important, especially in a use case like stablecoins, right? So if I was issuing a stablecoin, then I would want to issue perhaps a particular round of these assets, and then maybe I want to burn some, and then maybe I want to issue some more. And so to do that and yet have them all be fungible, we have this sort of group key, this sort of group level here to this data structure. And so you can do multi-sig there, and then of course you can do it all the way down here at the bottom at the asset level. Cool. All right, so I think we'll save questions till the end, although I imagine we might have some because there's a lot of information here. But I will go ahead and move on to talking about assets and Lightning channels, and we'll spend some time here because this is the really cool, new, exciting stuff with this release. Cool. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about opening asset channels. We're going to talk about paying asset invoices, and we're going to show you a video of a multi-hop payment using an edge node. And of course, I will explain what an edge node is. All right, so first thing first, has anyone here played with Lightning sort of on the command line on a computer? Done a bit of that? No? All right, cool. So what I'm going to show you is just using a CLI tool, right? So we're going to use a CLI tool in this next video, and we're going to do that, and we're going to open a channel, and it's going to look a lot like it would opening a channel normally, just using a CLI tool, but this time we're going to add some assets to it. Right, so we have our first video. Can we play the first video, please? Awesome. Cool. So we can look at the command we're using. Oh, first here I'm showing you the assets that I have on this node, and I grab that asset ID. I minted some mega test bucks, right? And I'm using the terminal CLI, lit CLI there, and adding a bunch of flags to it, and I'm doing that fund channel command, and then you can see we added the asset ID at the end there. And then we are able to use that to open a channel, and that's an on-chain transaction to open a Lightning channel that includes Taproot assets in it. So that's quite cool. All right, let's move along, and we're going to talk about now when I open a channel, right? So that was a clip of me and Leo from Lightning Labs. We both have testnet nodes, and we opened a channel with each other, right? And we were then going back and forth. And so I minted these mega test bucks, and then I opened a channel with Leo that included these mega test bucks in them. And then Leo can create an invoice, an asset invoice, and then I can pay that. And so in this next video, we're going to first take a look at the balance, the asset balance of that channel, walk through what some of the CLI commands look like when you create and pay an invoice, and then look again at after I paid that invoice, the updated balance in that channel. Right, so I'm just proving to you all that this works, right? Okay, so here's list channels, and then you can see at the bottom there, that's the current balance that I have in that channel. This is the command that Leo ran to create that invoice, right? So all the usual flags, and then you can see he uses this ln add invoice, and he notes the asset ID and the amount that he wants to make this invoice for. So those 50,000 mega test bucks, right? But here's the command that I'm going to use to pay that invoice. So I'm using ln pay invoice, and then just like you normally would, you paste in that invoice string. So I'm going to do that in a second, and you can see I'm also noting the asset ID that I'm going to use to pay that invoice. Yep, that's it right there. I paste it in, and I pay that, I confirm, and you can see, yep, it succeeded. And note here up at the top, you're talking about, looks like quote, right? A quote for that, and we'll talk about that RFQ quote process in just a second here. There it is. We'll come right back to that and explain what that means in a minute. But then we'll show you that this worked. We're going to go back and look at the channel balance, and we can see that Leo now has 50,000 mega test bucks, right? So we're able to update our asset channel balance. So very cool stuff. All right. Now we paid that invoice. Cool. All right. So let's talk about the edge node. And I'm imagining no one here is yet familiar with what an edge node is. So I will go into some depth on this, right? So this one's fun. All right, what is an edge node? Sorry, I'm going to read from a slide, and then I'll show you nice pictures. All right, an edge node is a Taproot asset-aware Lightning node that routes payments between Taproot asset channels and Bitcoin channels. If that doesn't make sense, I'll show you a picture in a second. All right, an edge node is a service provider with multiple public Bitcoin channels to the Lightning network and unannounced Taproot asset channels with their clients. All right. What makes an edge node different to an ordinary routing node or Lightning service provider is the ability to route payments in different denominations on the Lightning network. All right, so first let's look at this next video, which will show in just a second. Here we go, we'll watch it now. Shows how we can route payments through the Lightning network that include these assets. So if we can run that video one more time, please, is that a possibility? And then we can see that it starts at green on, or we can even just, yeah, there we go. Oh, the animation video one more time, but I want to note like the edges, right? So you can see that that green notes sort of Taproot asset channel, and then we have orange all the way through the middle of the network, and then we have green again at the edge, right? So Alice can send out a US dollar stablecoin, send it through the broader Lightning Network in Satoshis, right? So all these nodes in the middle don't have to know anything about Taproot assets if they don't want to. They do not have to be involved. This is entirely opt-in if you want to. And then all the way at the edge, the other end of the network, we can have Zane that also receives, a US dollar stablecoin at the other end of the network. But we have this question here, who is this node, right? And what are they doing that they can receive US dollar stable coins, a Taproot asset, and then send out Bitcoins, right? Send out Satoshis, right? What is that node doing? And that right there, that's an edge node. So now, let's go back to the slides and we'll talk through what an edge node is. All right, so here I have a nice graphic, right? And this is anyone, right? Anyone can set up an edge node. So I've set up an edge node on Bitcoin's testnet, right? So I just took a Lightning node, I switched over to this, lit-D setup, this terminal setup, and I have some assets, right? I have some assets because I minted them, right? And then I opened channels with my colleagues and friends, right? But what I do is this is my node here, right? If I'm acting as the edge node. And then maybe this is my channel with Leo that has mega test bucks, right? And then we can also imagine that perhaps in the future this might be like a wallet provider, right? And they might have these channels with some of their users, and perhaps this is a Euro stablecoin channel, right? And this is a US dollar stablecoin channel. And they might have all of these users here where they have these channels with. And then they have these maybe larger channels, public channels out to the broader Bitcoin Lightning Network. So in this scenario, we can then look, I'm going to come back to this one. I want to first look at this picture here. All right, so Alice wants to pay Bob, right? So Bob has provided some sort of service for Alice. Alice wants to pay him. She has a US dollar stablecoin channel. She is going to update her balance, just like we just saw in that last video or the 2 videos before. She's going to update her balance with the edge node here, and that edge node also has this channel, this Satoshi channel with Bob, and that channel, that node is then going to pay Bob, like update their balance in their channel with Bob. Right? So do we all get that concept? Like, that's how that works? Cool. All right. So another question that we might have here is, well, how does this edge node, how does Alice, the edge node, and Bob know how many Satoshis to send, right? So if Alice is sending $20 worth of US dollar stablecoin, how do we know how many Satoshis Bob is supposed to get? And how do we all agree on this process, right? That's a tricky one. So let's go back to this RFQ process, which is request for quote. Obviously, this is pretty detailed, and we're just going to gloss over it at a fairly high level, but the request for quote is a mechanism that simplifies sending Taproot assets over Lightning Network channels. Cool. The request for quote contains a rate and an expiration time, which allows the sender to decide whether they want to complete the payment and craft a route to the intended recipient. So if we go back to this picture, right, Bob might create an invoice for Alice to pay. Right? Bob creates that. But first, maybe he pings the edge node and he says, hey, how many, I want to pay Alice, $20 in this US dollar stable coin. How many Satoshis do I need to send you, for you to make this, facilitate this transaction, right? To make this swap for me. And that edge node sends back this quote, and then Bob can accept it or reject it and go connect to another edge node because he thinks this one's ripping him off, right? So Bob has, Bob can decide what he wants to do there, but we go through this whole process, and then Bob creates that invoice, Alice pays it, and this transaction goes through, right? Roughly. There's obviously a lot more details to that, but that's at a high level how that all works. Okay, is everyone still with me? We're good on that? Okay, cool. All right. So now I think we're going to go, we're going to look at a video. But before we play the video, and explain to you what is happening here. And what happened in this particular video is that, again, I had a node set up, right? And I have this asset channel set up with Leo. And in this case, Leo is acting as the edge node, and he also has another node set up, which is just a regular Satoshi's Lightning node, right? And he generated for me an invoice, which was denominated in Satoshis, right? A regular Satoshi invoice. And then I received that and I paid it. So I took a regular Satoshi invoice and I paid it using Taproot Assets, right? So, and that went through his edge node, and because his edge node was set up to do that, and, he configured it appropriately, it was happy to take that trade. So I was able to pay a Satoshi's based invoice using assets. So a very cool functionality there. Let's take a look at this next video where we see that happening. Cool. So that's the lit CLI that we're using. We're doing this command ln pay invoice, and you can see that big long string. Oh yeah, I'm specifying the outgoing channel. And here is this big long string, which is the Satoshi's based invoice that I'm going to pay. And that's the asset ID that I'm going to use to pay it. And I'm going to confirm. We can have a look at that. And it succeeded, right? It went through there. You can see it went through Leo's edge node. And you can take a look at this whole process that happened in the background, where it was this request for quote converting between those two different assets, right? So lots of different stuff happening there. Very cool. Now, let's go back to the slides. Cool. All right. So I talked kind of fast. Now we have plenty of time for questions. That was a lot of information. Who has some questions about assets in Lightning, edge nodes, how any of that works? I have here, we have the docs. So if you want to go and have a look at the docs, docs.lightning.engineering, we have pages up there specifically on edge nodes and how that works, on the RFQ process. This is, of course, the repo. This is all open source software. So you can go have a look through it, read through it yourself if that's the thing that you're into. And on YouTube, we have a whole series of videos talking through this functionality. We'll have a couple more videos coming soon, but I think we have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, who are the request for quote providers? Like, how exactly do you become one? And
yeah. Okay, awesome. So who are the request for quote providers? Basically, who can be an edge node, right? And the answer to that one, and this is a good one, there we are, we'll put that picture up, is anyone, right? Like this is Bitcoin, right? So anyone can join it if they want to. So I currently have a testnet node set up that is an edge node, and I intend to also do that on the main node, right? On the mainnet. So what you have to do is you have to have a Taproot Assets enabled Lightning node, right? So you can do that using that setup that we talked about earlier. Lightning terminal is a great way to get set up and start doing that. And then you just set some configuration. Now, the tricky part is how do you get that how do you get that exchange rate, right? So how am I going to decide how much this asset is worth in Satoshis, right? So basically on the Lightning Network, everything's denominated in Satoshis, so you're always coming back to that. So what you have to do is you have to configure your node to talk to some sort of price oracle, right? And that can be whatever you want. Someone can offer that service and you can connect to it. You can run your own price oracle, right? To maybe just scrape information off various different exchanges, right? So basically in your configuration file, there's a line where you just say, hey, this is the destination for where you get this pricing information from. And in the Taproot Assets repo, there's an example price oracle that you can go have a look at if you wanted to build one yourself. So really, like anything else in Bitcoin, you need a computer, you need an internet connection, and for this you need a little bit of tech skills, and then you're up and running, and anyone can be an edge node. Cool.
So that process where Bob gets the quote back from the edge node and then has to decide, is this legit or not?
Yeah.
Is that something that's like a manual, like a person has to actually look at that? Or is that something where like a software would handle that and they could set like a limit of exchange rate that they're comfortable with, and if they're not, it would automatically go try to hit another edge node?
So it is, you could do it manually, but I wouldn't recommend it, right? So absolutely, it's a setting that would be in Bob's node, in his node configuration file, or in the wallet that he's using. There will be a setting there. And I can imagine, someone building a wallet where you might be able to have like manually set, like this is sort of the range that I'm accepting, or probably more likely you would just pick like, hey, this exchange, I kind of trust them. So as long as it's not too out of range of what's happening here, like I'm cool with this, right? So it'd be something that, the user would set some sort of range, or the wallet provider would set some sort of range, and then that lives in the configuration, and that happens automatically.
Thank you.
All right. Further questions on edge nodes, Taproot Assets on Lightning, any of this? All right, I'll go one more time, just back to the slides here. Again, we have some new demo videos coming out where I stole some of these clips from those demo videos, so you'll be able to see that in a little bit more depth. We have one coming out that's entirely on edge nodes and how to set it up. So this configuration we were just talking about, you'll be able to see like me just walk through all of that, how to set it up and why you'd want to do it, various different settings and whatnot. All right. I think unless anyone's got any more questions, I think we're done. Are you good? All right. Thank you very much.